All right, people are joining. Welcome to day two. So, a bit of logistics and announcements. If you go to Google Classroom, oh gosh, let me open that tab. You'll see a little bit on how asynchronous instruction will work. And let me just walk you through some of the stuff I expect for that. So, as this loads up, you'll see my like bunch of Google Classrooms that I'm part of, and it is super overwhelming, but we work through it. So in Block 6, you'll see I posted an announcement. This is more so for Block 1's case because they're purely asynchronous. So the things you've already done are right here, right? You've completed the survey, you've signed up for Piazza, you've signed up for CS Awesome, I hope. I got 66 people. I signed up 3 times myself to test various things, so there's 63 of you, and I think there's a little missing 1 or 2. To get that started, today's main focus is 4-4s. A lot of these programming assignments you can start by yourself ahead of time. Those are all on this website, APCS Lowell. Just gradually work your way down. These programming assignments will largely remain unchanged, so you can do them ahead of time if you feel like it, or go at the pace that the class is going at. It's an option. Weekly reflections. A lot of you have been updating that. Some of you have yet to turn one in. The consequence is that you may be marked absent for like today's attendance, right? If we were asynchronous, if we weren't meeting live, and I don't see anything by 3 p.m., then the consequence is Synergy will show up as absent, right? You didn't give me any evidence that you were here. So that's it. What's up? Yeah, this is where I'm a bit unclear, right? Although they're weekly reflections, I do want you to daily like edit and turn in, right? Add on, so that I see some level of progress. This is trying to mirror like me walking around the room seeing you're on task. So even if it's a sentence or two, you want to update it daily with what you did for programming class, for this computer science class. Does that help? Mm-hmm. And on Friday, you'll formally get a grade for it, right? You've done your daily assignments, then you get 4 out of 4. This is a little change for people that had me previously, where I just check when Friday and give you a grade and mark attendance then. It's because the online learning attendance policy has changed, so this is the consequence of that. Good question. I hope I summarized it in the video. Sometimes I forget to rephrase. So here's a quick example. This is like for you tomorrow, so tell me and summarize for you all Wednesday when we're asynchronous on what you did. Short and sweet. All right. Google Classroom will primarily be used for turning in assignments and grading. Otherwise, all the other stuff, your main hub is this website, okay, apcs.github.io. Either memorize it, save in your bookmarks, but this is where you're going to go. Today, we'll be clicking on this 4-4 challenge over here. I don't think my mouse shows up in my recording, so I'm going to highlight. Please click on that. And then you'll be brought to this page. And I'll walk you through some of these tutorials. This was created by Mr. Simon a while ago. It all works on the browser, so you don't have to download anything, and we'll begin writing our first Java program. The goal is to work down the page, and as soon as we get there, you have your first programming assignment called 4-4s, and we'll explain that in detail. So what you need to know from here, right, is the common pattern where you write code on like some place, and then the computer is going to talk to you in another place. So that's the right-hand side of my screen. When we click run, it says connecting the server, it says run, and then it says hello world. That's a very common computer science idea. You have some text appearing on the screen, and that's the structure of like the very basic Java program. All this stuff that I'm highlighting in lines 1 and line 3, line numbers are denoted on the left-hand side of like whatever editor you're using, wherever you're typing. These words we will make sense of a little bit at a time, but for now, it just like know that these things have to be there for Java programs to run. For those that are curious, it's because Java is object-oriented, like throughout, and these things, the main object, the basic Java program, all that are iterations of objects, right? And those need to be there in order for it to run. So as we move down the page, we focus now into line 4 and what this line is doing. This is our first line of code, and its job is to print things to the screen. What system, right, is actually an object. We'll learn about those later. Out is another object. So just take it as like this is the whole line of code that we need. This is the last part. Print line or print ln is the one that prints certain text to the screen, and that's the part that's really important. Inside the parentheses, you'll see input, right? Think about math, think about other coding experiences you had before. This is the input. So this part, it can change. It could be other words. It could be numbers. It could be letters. And that's what we'll go into. We'll talk more about it. Okay, this is a statement or a line of code in Java. The one thing that will likely get you is what I'm highlighting right now is the semicolon. All lines of code in Java pretty much have to end with a semicolon. So if you're coming from JavaScript, if you're coming from CS principles and whatever language you use there, or you come from my Python class, right, that's going to be a big change. You need semicolons to be there. Why does the semicolon need to be there? Think about the computer, or more formally the compiler. It needs to know when certain lines of code ends, and it's a marker for the computer to know that, this guy's done talking, I'm going to process it and do what he asked, so on and so forth, to each next line. Another things that are important, double quotes, right? I think that's an idea that I will get to when we go down the page. Neat. So in this little example, click Run. On your end, have it open on a separate tab. You can follow along. You have a subtle difference, but you'll see it mattering as we format, right? In the beginning, it's kind of boring. It's just lines of text at the screen. We're so used to technology that that's really boring. But way back when computers were first made, that's a really big deal, getting certain pixels to print out text. The other function that we talk about is print, right? That's without the ln after it. That's going to print stuff a little differently, right? You can predict the output because that carriage or new line character, right, which is formally this I forget the way. I'm leaning back. Yeah, \n. Okay, that thing is what is the equivalent of pressing return or pressing enter on your Google Doc or your text editor. So in line 3 right now, I have modeled the same output, but a little bit different lines of code. Okay, notice the difference there. Oops. Actually, let's see what happens when I type that, right? I'm typing really fast, I pressed the wrong key. There's an error, okay, on the right-hand side. The computer is good in telling you that here's a mistake, and it tells you which line number it is. Okay, Java 3, that part's going to be important as you program, as we work on more complicated lines of code. And so it points you to line 3, something's wrong here, and it kind of points out that, okay, the computer, the compiler, stopped making sense of my code right about here. And you go back and see, yes, there's no print semicolon n, it's print line. You print it, and then you get some kind of output. All right, you can go back and read this. I'm just giving you my interpretation of the ideas here. Next up, we have a comment. Comments are really useful for you as the audience of your program. You think about it as annotations or notes. Later, when you write bigger programs, your audience expands. Let's say you become a software engineer, you're working on a team, then the comments are used for your team because your program needs to make sense to them. And later on, if you work on even bigger scaled projects, commenting is super important. I've trained you hopefully in computer programming that you're commenting each line of code, right? So anything that's here, right, with these forward slashes, the slashes lean forward, is ignored. This is ignored. You run, and then you'll see the output is blank. I call these sanity checks, right? System.out.println, because when I see nothing there, it makes me like feel uneasy that it's like, oh, nothing's there. Like this should actually appear. That makes me feel a little bit better because I want to see something. I don't like seeing nothing, right? Then it's like, okay, cool, my program works. You can comment out even lines of code, and that's going to be ignored. Here's another weird thing. That part is going to be red. This is ignored. Look at that. Ta-da. Right, so that's kind of useful if you want to append to the end of a line. But notice if I move this here, right, to the front, all right, think about what's going to be outputted. That's a little game you can play with yourself, because later for the AP test, which may change, but traditionally the pen and paper AP test, you don't have the computer right there to help you out. You have pen and paper, and you yourself play the role of the compiler. You got to think about what your output is. So hopefully during that time you thought about it, and maybe this matched what you were thinking, maybe not. Right. So those are some basic tools of printing to the screen. Now we're going to go over operations and literals and expressions. What the heck does that mean? So literal, like when we say literally, it's whatever was spoken before it. So to the computer, that's the little quotation marks, the double quotes. So notice here in this first program, line 3 and line 5 are going to produce two wildly different outputs, right? Predict to yourself for a moment on what's going to be outputted, and then click run to confirm. Ta-dang, right? Literal, you print out the characters 4/4. But in line 5, because those little quotes are not there, that gets interpreted, right? Expressions are interpreted, they're ran by the computer, and it does 4 divided by 4, which gives you the familiar math output of 1. Do we talk about single quotes? Let's see, right? It begs the question, do single quotes do anything special? Print line. Yeah, it doesn't accept single quotes. It's only double quotes. So those, oh wait, semicolon, right? Good catch, thank you. Okay, yeah. Single quotes are totally different depending on the languages you come from. Sometimes they're the same. So these 2 weeks really is focusing on like the differences. Try things out. The compiler doesn't have any feelings. It won't judge you on whether or not you got it wrong and laugh in your face. Cool. Oh, okay, yeah. Yes, but it's not laughing at you. Or after a while, you may feel like the computer is making fun of you, but it's not. You can make the computer do other things if you want to punish it. I've gotten it to points in my life where the computer became like a person to me, and I was interacting with them in very odd ways. But I'll tell you about that later. Right. It's also worth noting that spaces count as characters, right? So even though right now those spaces, we can't see them on the screen, they're actually there, right? So blah, okay, blah. So if you want to fine tune your formatting, then like take note of these white spaces. Kind of mentioned this already about error messages. This is the part where you can kind of predict what the computer will say, analyze these lines of code with your eyes, pause the video if you're watching it later. So it should be right there. We run, it gives us some output. It says that, or syntax error, right? So that's a spelling error, variable art, that doesn't exist. We'll talk about variables later. So at the moment, if you want the word art to appear, the name art, then you need to put in the double quotes. And then your output is what you expected. If questions do arise at any point, feel free to unmute and ask or type in chat. What's up? Yes, please. Good question. I'm trying to think about other types of expressions. And like I think so the answer doesn't immediately come to me because I'm a little unsure. I'm like 80% sure of my answer. The student asked, are expressions just math expressions? And I think for the most part, yes. If you were to do, I don't know if we talk about it, right? But like, let's say you had a sentence that you wanted us to put with another test sentence, right? And you use some kind of operation, like putting them together, adding. Um, that would count as an expression, but Java may, um, like how you make Java do it may vary, right? So what am I saying? Like if you put, for example, like plus, right? Like for my Python user, just JavaScript users, right? Like this, right? There's a non-mathematical expression, but Java may not know what the plus means, right? But in JavaScript and Python, that works. So let's see. See, so there is an example of a non-mathematical expression. And then you'll see the plus, like how odd it is, right? It put two things together. Mr. Simon kind of warned me about this because like it breaks the kind of patterns we're used to. So be careful. And hope that answers your question. Thank you for asking. Okay. Formatting with spaces. There's your new line character and a bug. No interface. Enum not legal. What happened? Right here, right? Because we didn't add the spaces. So it emphasizes the spelling that's here. Static void main. We'll talk about each of those words and what they mean throughout the course. Double check the time so I'm not rambling on too long. We end at 12:30. Still got 15 minutes. Okay. New line is the one you'll know, like really need to know. There's spaces. From my programming experience, tab is a thing, so that's like \t. Right, so it's indented that ways. These are like the hidden characters. They're white space characters that like the computer sees, \n space \t and a whole bunch of other things, but we as humans, we don't see that, but it's meant different to the computer. So we'll leave it there. And if you want to format your text to look different ways, then you can Google and look up those options. Oh gosh. Very bad what we call style here, right? You can put it all into one word because the computer's used to recognizing like semicolon means line of code, spaces, and these are all keywords that are reserved for a computer, but like reserved in Java to mean special things. So this works. But as humans, as we read it, like that's terrible, right? Imagine having all your program in one line of code, all like 1,000 something lines. It could work, but it's terrible for the guy that has to read it. So in this case, it's me as the teacher. Like, don't do that to me. Don't make me try to interpret your code all in one line, right? I'm not even gonna bother. 0 out of 4. Move on. Yes, please. Like with print lines, right? Like for example, like text bottom, here is the day I am alive. Okay, like that, right? Like two sentences that you can format this way. Good question. Like, would you do this, or would you like copy and paste this part, add in another system.out.println, and then put it in quotes, right? Am I reading the question correctly? Yeah. Like, so it was like the oops. I don't need that. There we go. Right. So either this that I'm showing you here, or like this, right? Which one do you prefer? So that's a stylistic choice, right? Thinking about my leg fell asleep. Thinking about who, like what appeals to you as a reader. If we're following with the example here, make use of lines. I prefer this one because it's easier for me to read as the programmer. Anyone else later in the that reads this program, it's also easier for them to read. Like this top-down approach. I only have so much space on my screen, so I like to chunk things. Okay. So if you want a right answer, or like a preferred answer would be like this. You'll notice in my emails, I always press carriage return after each sentence because that's my training, right? I'm a computer programmer. So then enter, 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 enter. I don't have paragraphs. That doesn't really speak to me. Yep, good question. So the student asked a style choice, right? One line for text, specifically test, or breaking it up with different lines of code. And the latter, that's the answer. So here's your programming assignment. For the remainder of class, please work on 4-4s. Here are some new operations that I'll demonstrate over here. We're writing mathematical expressions for the numbers as 1 through 10 using 4-4s, right? All four of these 4 characters must be used. Like, how do we get 2? Something like this, right? 4 divided by 4 plus 4 divided by 4. See if that gives us 2. Okay, it gives us 0. It's something to do with order of operations, right? Yeah, we could fix, oh, there's an extra slash. There we go, there's your 2. So play around with these very familiar math operations just to get used to writing these out. Feel free to go on and think about numbers like 11 through 20 and so on, only if you have time. And the directions are rather clear. This is how you will submit them to Google Classroom, okay? You can replace that with your own. As long as the numbers that I see are 1 through 10. Good question. So for the video, the student asked, do we have to use line 3 in our program? The answer is no. You can change that to your liking. Does that answer your question? Good question. So if you read these lines of text, it walks you through it. I'll show you visually while we're here. If you click on this little icon, it gives you some options on how you want to share it. The one we're interested in is link. When you click that, this link is unique to you. Okay, so this remembers the code that you wrote, and this is what you need to put into Google Classroom. Okay, yep, not a problem. Do ask the question. So the question was about how do we submit, and that's what I just summarized. All right, cool. The remainder of class, please work on your 4-4s assignment. You can get started with your asynchronous work too on CS Awesome, reading through some more fine details on like the building blocks of Java, all right?